Isabel is my name. My life was divided into before and after 4 years ago, in a room without windows that smelled of terrible news and disinfectant. I was 46, married to a man named David for more than 20 years. Max, our son, recently turned 18. We were a typical, cozy family. Or so I believed. I met David in college. He possessed that calm charisma that keeps doors open and remembers what you had for coffee. He said the right things and occasionally brought flowers home. He was trustworthy, predictable, secure. However, the performance is often taken away by cancer. There was a lump at first. I discovered it while doing a pathetic self-evaluation, the type you do while brushing your teeth in front of the mirror. I nearly disregarded it. However, I felt compelled to investigate. I wish I could tell you that I was aware, but I wasn't. Not at all. When the doctor sensed it, his expression shifted. I recall that more than what he said. Breast cancer in stage 2. In that office, I did not cry. I didn't say anything. I don't even smoke, I thought as I gazed at a billboard on quitting smoking on the wall. I sat down with David and Max that evening. Even now, when I struggle to speak, I can still feel the weight in my chest. I declared, I have cancer. My voice faltered. Max cast his gaze to the ground. David touched me on the shoulder. He declared, We'll overcome this together. It had a hollow sound. It seemed as though he was reading it from a poorly practiced script. I wanted to believe him, though. I had to trust him. Weeks of needles, tests, scans, and heartbreaking discussions ensued. It wasn't sugar-coated by my oncologist. I had extensive chemotherapy and radiation after surgery. It would be cruel. I was prepared to fight, though. There was nothing I could do. David used to drive me to all of my appointments. Head down, headphones in. Max remained largely silent. I attributed it to shock, fear, perhaps. Give them time, I urged myself. However, time did not heal. It came to light. After 2 months of treatment, things started to change. David began to scan through his phone continuously, while seated at the far end of the couch. He no longer inquired about my feelings, ceased attempting to grasp my hand, ceased to sleep in our bed. Then one evening, I heard him talking on the phone in a whisper in the guest room. She has changed, he remarked. This is not what I signed up for. I didn't get any sleep that evening. It wasn't the nausea, not because my bones hurt. However, from those words, I questioned him about it early the following morning. Be calm. Too quiet, almost. I believe that I already knew. He turned pale, didn't refute it. He simply stood there, gaping, as if he was waiting for me to give him an explanation. At last, he declared, I can no longer do this. There is no life here. For whom? I inquired. For me, he said. I wish to survive. I also deserve to be happy. It sounded like a confession from him, as if he had been the victim. He made a bag 2 days later. Max simply dragged his suitcase down the hall, shut his door, and walked out without saying anything. No farewell. The front door closing, that's all. Wearing a paper-thin medical gown and sitting on the edge of my bed, I had an IV pumping poison into my veins. And I became aware of my true loneliness for the first time. No husband, no son, no system of support. Nothing but the icy murmur of a once full house. They were unaware of the fact that I wasn't defenseless, though, and they never gave it any thought. I wasn't finished. Not even close. My parents gave me a small inheritance after they passed away many years ago. I had made prudent investments. I operated a modest but reliable accounting firm. The house was completely mine. Despite my lack of wealth, I was able to support myself. Silently so. Furthermore, I was still alive. Giving up would have been simpler, to let the illness to consume me as they believed it would. But I'm not like that. When my hair was falling out in bunches, and my reflection appeared to be a stranger in the dark, I vowed to myself, I shall return stronger if I make it through this. And I will never again be treated like a disposable item. They believed they had left a dying woman behind. What they were unaware of was that she was only beginning. The days following their departure are hazy. Mornings are what I remember the most. Waking up and momentarily losing awareness of their absence, then smacking chilly linen with a hand across the bed. The worst was the instant between truth and sleep. The house was quiet. Yet it didn't feel serene. It was like having a second sickness. One chemo was inaccessible. Everything was heavier. I was winded by the steps. My reflection reminded me of someone I knew in the past. I would stroke my scalp stubble with my fingertips before turning my head away. I ceased to raise the blinds. I stopped talking to myself. When it was this quiet, the home didn't echo. The sound was swallowed whole. Even though I was battling for my life, I felt like I had already lost something more profound. I was bald, ill, and too weak to carry my own groceries, so I had to do everything by myself for the first time in more than 20 years. Nevertheless, I did it, because there was no other option. That's when the odd thing occurred. Individuals I hardly knew stepped in. After years of merely exchanging niceties, Miss S. Carter from next door began delivering soup to my door every other night. Lentils, chicken, and perhaps tomato basil. No notes, no inquiries, just a glass container of warmth. One day, Alicia, a college acquaintance I hadn't seen in years, arrived with a stack of feel-good movies and a bag of groceries. She remarked, "You don't get to disappear on me. In 1999, you once restrained my hair during that tequila episode. It's time to repay the favor." I chuckled till I started crying. I then sobbed till I started laughing once more. When I was unable to drive, a volunteer group from the nearby church, which I never went to but always intended to, offered to transport me to my treatments. One day, Eleanor, a retired nurse, arrived on my porch with a clipboard, a hard handshake, and unflinching eyes. With silver hair, calloused hands, and the no-nonsense spirit of a woman who had seen too much and yet showed up, she was in her 60s. She sat beside me on the porch and said, "I'm not here to pity you. I'm here to support you in your battle." She also did. She took me to my appointments in her car. She checked my medications again. On the days when I wanted to curl up under a blanket, she made me eat toast. She made me laugh at things I hadn't considered funny in months, reprimanded me when I neglected to journal, and sat with me when the stillness got too heavy. The physicians were unable to save me, but that woman did, and gradually, almost unconsciously, I began to regain consciousness. But the emotional scars? Those persisted. I occasionally browsed through old pictures. Max at his graduation from high school. David smiled and put his arm around him. I believed those times to be real, that we were content. Looking back, though, I questioned if I was the only thing keeping everything together. Were they only fond of the helpful version of me? I received a letter one afternoon. My heart stopped as I saw the penmanship. Max. There was no apology. There was no "How are you, Mom?" Or "Perhaps I've been considering you." It was a request. In order for him to get a car, he requested that I co-sign a private loan. "I miss you? No. Don't bring up my health. Simply, is there anything you can still give me?" I looked at it for a while. I then ripped it in two. Next, into quarters. Then, as if something holy was finally leaving me, I watched the smoke curl upward as I burned the pieces in the sink. I stopped thinking about them returning at that point. I stopped looking at my phone and stopped visualizing scenes of reconciliation. Nobody was returning home. Not for me. Not for me, but perhaps for something from me. What about that clarity? It was cruel. It was liberating, though. I converted the vacant guest room into a workspace, resumed doing light freelance work, accounting, taxes. I maintained my composure and kept my name clean. Nobody was aware of Max or David. Isabel was all I was to my clients. Not Isabel, the cancer patient. Not Isabel, the deserted wife. Only me. I was encouraged to journal by Eleanor. She persisted despite my initial resistance. "Before it consumes you, put it in writing," she advised. So I did. Each and every evening. Just a sentence, sometimes. At other instances, entire pages of ink and tears. One entry said, "They departed. However, I stayed. I got into a fight. I made it through. I am powerful because of that. I had been in remission for a year. My hair grew back in wisps of delicate silver. I invited Eleanor and Alicia over and got myself a bottle of sparkling cider. Under the fairy lights in my backyard, we shared a toast. There was no party. It was a silent victory. The kind that doesn't require confetti or cake. That might be the end of my story, I thought. The silent reconstruction. I was mistaken. Because 3 weeks later, I received news on my phone that would rock my world. Harold, my great uncle, who I hadn't seen in over a decade but occasionally corresponded with via letters, had died. I inherited his whole estate, property, stocks, an account that is located abroad. I was worth $8 million after taxes, fees, and a week of astonished quiet. I knew they would return as I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the document's number. David, Max. They would come sniffing around again, the ones who left me with tubes in my arms and no one to hold my hand. However, they were unaware of an important fact. The lady they left behind was not me. What about the house they used to know? They had left it as their home. The stage, that is. For the last act, there was a knock first. It's not a friendly tap, nor one who is timid. When you feel like you belong somewhere, you knock like this. Halfway through pouring my morning coffee, I found myself in the kitchen. I felt the sound in my chest. My hand froze. I remained motionless as the cup swelled to overflowing. I didn't have to look to know who it was. David, Max, too. After 4 years of stillness, they stood on my porch, as if they had just returned from a long weekend getaway. My initial thought, is this authentic? My second, it is, of course. There are 8 million reasons. The door was not opened by me. Not immediately. All I did was stand behind it. Looked through the peephole at them. David appeared, worn out. I had lost the polished man I had known. He had a spotty beard. His clothing was rumpled, as if his life had fallen apart and he was at a loss for what to wear. Max, now taller, stood behind him, older. However, his eyes remained the same. I'm still rather uncomfortable, still cringing at the thought of repercussions. For a long time, they stood there. David then banged once again. This time, it's harder, he called, Isabel. All we want to do is talk. I slightly opened the door, my face just enough for them to see. David glowed, like if we had known each other for years. Max smiled half-heartedly. I remarked, I'm shocked you're here. My voice is calm, steady. I assumed that without me, you were still too busy living your best life. David paused to smile. May we enter? I shut the door behind me and went outdoors. No, I replied. You are free to speak from here. The atmosphere shifted, similar to how it is before a storm. Keep quiet, heavy, awaiting. David cleared his throat. Harold was mentioned to us. Regarding the inheritance, you certainly did. I reasoned that perhaps we might have a conversation. Make a new beginning. Get back in touch. I laughed. It wasn't resentful. It was worn out. Reconnect? After nothing for 4 years? At last, Max said something. Mom, we had no idea how to return. It was challenging. Once more, there it was. Hard. It was never easy. For them, as though they had actually witnessed me struggle for my life, I gave them both a look. Allow the quiet to linger. Then I uttered the word one had been keeping to myself. I was no longer useful, therefore you departed. Because I was ill, bald, feeble. Because the version of myself that served you wasn't me. David's mouth opened. That's unfair, no, I interrupted, saying. Being left to die by yourself wasn't fair. Having no one to assist me stand when I woke up from surgery wasn't fair. He closed his mouth. Max turned his head away. At the time, he was too young. Not too young, though, to decide. He went out that door after his father. He also didn't turn around. I answered, I remember everything. Every day, each quiet. All the phones that didn't ring, David moved forward. Isabel, it's not just about the money. I arched an eyebrow. It's about family, he hurriedly added. Family, I said again, savoring the word as if it were something I once believed. You only think about your family when it suits you. Max was struck by that. I witnessed it. Something flickered behind the eyes. Perhaps guilt. Shame, perhaps. I didn't soften, though. I was unable to. David changed his voice. We were not perfect, I aired. However, we would like to re-enter your life, I remarked. Funny how that desire appeared once there were millions on the table. He didn't dispute it, as he was unable to. I saw each of them for what they were at that very instant. Not monsters, just men who valued ease above dedication, who cherished the concept of me rather than the real me. Not the woman who healed in the dark and bled in silence. The house was missing, the food, the security. I centered my life on them. They wanted me back now that I had improved, strengthened, and made more money for myself. However, that door was already shut, and the key was in my possession. I said, taking a step back, I need time to think. David started to say anything else, but I interrupted him with a quiet last sentence. Whatever you're looking for here. It will not be what you anticipate. I turned after that. I shut the door after that. And now? It remained closed. He believed that I would let the past go. I didn't. I never opened the door once more. I knew they would try, though. David never gave up on a challenge he believed he could win, particularly when money was at stake. A letter appeared 2 days later. No address for return. However, the handwriting was instantly recognizable to me, slanted, overly tidy, as if he valued appearances over accuracy. 3 pages. 3 lengthy pages, with thoughtful wording. It was David in his best form. Remorse without any true responsibility. Emotional expressions intended to evoke a past, latent aspect of me. The one who continued to believe in vows of marriage. The one who used to wait for him to return home. However, I discovered the true cause hidden in the final paragraph. Max doxed for college. Being humble, David wrote, attempting to assist him. It has been challenging. It's always challenging. It would mean the world if I could consider helping till Max graduated. The hook was that, not getting better, not relatives. Get in. They failed to return for me. They returned to get what I had to offer. Not because I needed clarification, but because I wanted to read it again. I poured a glass of wine and sat in front of the fireplace. I had that already. To remind you of the conclusion, I read it as if you were reading a story you had heard previously. I took up the phone after that. Isabel, said my attorney, when can I expect to hear from you? I said, we should discuss estate planning, and we must make it completely airtight. I revised everything over the course of the following week. Will, power of attorney, recipients. I transferred the house into a trust that I had established. All the details are explained. Every gap was closed. Max and David? No footnote at all. I instead left it to those who had been there when it counted, including my neighbor who never let me skip a meal, Eleanor, Alicia, and the local cancer organization. However, I had other plans as well. I got to work remodeling the guest room. When things got hard, David would sleep in the same room. I made a studio out of it, recording apparatus, journals, a filing cabinet that is lockable, one physical drive and one cloud-based drive. I started recording video entries while speaking directly into the camera. I was doing more than simply getting my defense ready. I was recording the truth. In one of the videos, I stated, I want this to be clear. They departed when I most needed them. And now, for convenience rather than affection, they're back. It wasn't paranoid. It was getting ready. Because you learn how to create armor, no one can see coming when you've been allowed to bleed alone. The automobile then arrived. Dark. At the corner, idling, tinted windows. The engine is going. For 20 minutes, it remained there. I stayed indoors. I remained motionless while I peered through the window. Not a paranoid one. Verification. That evening, I gave a security firm a call. My house was wired in less than 72 hours. Every aspect has cameras, alarms, sensors for motion. I replaced the locks. You learn something from surviving cancer that no one discusses. You stop taking chances. Eleanor and I sat on the porch that night. Told her everything. She remained silent. Simply reached out and grasped my hand. They will return, she uttered quietly. And you'll be prepared when they do. I gave a nod. I muttered, I want them to see what strength looks like. I want them to realize the consequences of their actions. Then I stopped. And when the moment is appropriate, I wished to demonstrate my transformation to them. Because retaliation wasn't the only goal here. It was about taking back everything they believed they could leave behind, including my power, my story, and my dignity. They believed I had left. However, I had only started writing the conclusion. They wouldn't be included either. I shut the door. I opened a new one after that. It was 2 weeks later. There was another knock. It was softer this time, hesitant, as if the sound itself was no longer sure that it belonged here. Before I walked, I glanced through the camera. Identical faces, the same porch. However, something had changed. David was irritated, as if this visit were a hassle. Max was standing behind him with his eyes on the ground, and his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. I partially opened the door. Didn't go outside. Simply wait. David was the first to speak. Our messages have been ignored by you. I have, I said, because I was at a loss for words. He let out a sigh. Come on, Isabel. For 20 years we were wed. We should at least have a conversation, don't you think? I arched an eyebrow. You want to discuss what you deserve now? Max took a step forward. He whispered, Mom, may I say something? I looked over at him, slowly. It had been 4 years since he had called me that. I understand that you're upset, he said. You are perfectly entitled to be. I felt afraid. I was self-centered. It was simpler, so I followed Dad. His voice broke. I promised myself that I would return, that it was temporary. However, days turned into months. And it was more difficult to face you the more I avoided you. I didn't know how to make it right, he said, looking up at me. Not everything was resolved by the words. However, they were authentic. Not well polished, not practiced, just the truth. And something softened inside of me. Not that he merited it. However, I had been anticipating hearing it. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but the truth. David, however, appeared irritated. He yelled, We didn't come here to grovel. You are presently in good health. You've moved on. So why do you still harbor resentment? Bitterness. I gazed at him. No, David, I'm not resentful. I understand. He opened his lips to say something else, but I cut him off. When it mattered, you weren't present. When I was too weak to stand, you went. My own bandages were replaced. I vomited by myself. I took a car to radiotherapy. You could have stayed. And you didn't. Max's eyes began to well up with tears. Wait, you were by yourself the entire time? I gave a nod. Your dad went out. You did the same. No phone calls, no messages. I fought for my life with the support of neighbors and strangers. Not you. Max appeared heartbroken. I was unaware. I assumed you were not interested in seeing us. I responded softly. No, I desired my family. Between us, silence descended, the kind that doesn't flinch and carries truth in its arms. As usual, it was broken by David. He declared, We're not here to relive the past. Now let's discuss what really matters. I cocked my head. I'll venture a guess. Harold's bequest. He didn't dispute it. I was made aware of the trust, the home, the cash. Max needs assistance. I could, too. Not everything is what we're requesting. Only a part of it. Calmly, I glanced at him. The memory of abandoning your wife to perish is weighing heavily on you. I'm sitting on the life I started from the beginning, he sneered. So you're going to live in luxury and let your own son suffer? Max clenched his jaw and turned to face him. Stop, Dad. We both gave him a look. He said, I don't want her money. I just wanted to apologize. David appeared in disbelief. Max went on, his voice steady. I parted ways with her. I trailed you. It was an error. I also bring it with me every day. I don't ask for pardon, but I had to let her know. Then he faced me once more. I'll be here if you ever want to talk. And he turned to leave. Keep quiet. Not a drama. A man who realized the importance too late. I didn't give him a call. However, something inside of me cracked, but it wasn't broken or open. Simply moved. What about David? David stayed. Then no. After 2 weeks, he returned. Eleanor and I were sitting on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset. The identical black vehicle. The same person ascends the stairs. I didn't get up this time, though. Eleanor also remained still. He appeared to be attempting to recall how to act human as he stood at the porch's edge. He said, I thought we should talk. Only us. I have nothing more to say, I answered. He made another attempt. Look, I realize I made a mistake. I lacked sufficient strength. However, perhaps we could figure something out. I cocked my head. David, forward to what? Calm. Finalization. Perhaps even reconciliation. He grinned. That politician's smile was practiced. He said, "I'm proud of you," as if it were meant to be a compliment. My brows went up. Happy that I made it through cancer? Or the $8 million I inherited? His grin broke. "The money is not why I'm here. What are you here for then?" He paused. At last he said, "Max. He needs assistance." "And I don't?" I inquired. "That's not what I said. You were not required to." He moved in the direction of the porch, attempted to sit on the stairway. I halted him. "You take a stand." He blinked. "What is this? A show?" "No," I replied. "It's the conclusion." I took an envelope out of the pocket of my sweater. "This is your farewell present." A copy of the trust documents was within. A letter, too. To him. He pulled it open. His expression changed. "What is this? This house is being legally transferred." "To whom?" "To a nonprofit in the area. For women recuperating from serious illnesses, it will serve as interim housing. It will be theirs in 30 days. His face turned white. "You gave the house away?" "I no longer require it. I purchased a tiny cottage. Keep quiet. Calm. Perfectly sized for one." His hands trembled. "This was our home." "No, it was my home. I covered the cost. I made it through it." "You abandoned it." He looked at me as if he had never seen me before. Perhaps he never did. I gave him another envelope. "The remainder of the property?" "Made a donation. Research on cancer. Shelters for women. Money for hospice care. Every last penny. You possessed millions," he muttered. "The day I realized I didn't need you, I had everything I needed." The envelope fell on the porch. "You are a cruel person." "No," I replied. "I am at liberty." The porch light flickered on behind me. Eleanor came out with my coat in her hand. "Now is the moment," she whispered softly. I pivoted, entered. "Shut the door. Don't slam. Don't yell. Just be quiet." I saw him standing there, little and hollow, through the window. He then strolled back to his car after gathering up the papers and stuffing them into his coat. "Max sent me a note that evening. I've heard of your actions about the house. It's amazing, Mom. I'm not worthy of your pardon. However, I hope to be given another chance someday." I sincerely apologize. I didn't answer. Not quite yet. However, I kept it. Because Max was different from David, and perhaps we'll speak again in the future. Not as a mother and son attempting to change history. However, as two individuals who had adapted to surviving it. I ended up losing a husband. For a while, I lost a son. I became ill. However, I discovered who I was, and it was sufficient.